Need versus best play available. We'll discuss.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight. You can't anywhere but right at Locked On. I am your host, Tenitra Batiste, and joining me today are Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Tori McElhaney. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, our football party's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So today we're going to make the case for our mocks in the deep dive and which Falcon is carrying the most weight. Also, contenders, potential, intriguing. Let's hear what JD, Free, and Tori have to say about which Falcons are. So first things first, guys. The Falcons reportedly hosted Washington Commanders defensive end and free agent James Smith-Williams over the weekend. And SI.com's Albert Breer said the Falcons also held a private workout with University of Washington QB Michael Penix Friday. So Jarvis, let's start with you. Which of these two most intrigues you on what he can bring to this Falcons team?
I mean, I can't. I'll be lying if I sat up here and said, you know what, Mr. Williams, that pressing need to have a rotational defensive lineman is gonna cite my world and just like, yes, I'm ready to go. But no, I have to go with Michael Penix Jr. because, like, when you think about them spending $100 million in guarantee to Kirk Cousins, and then you messing around and somehow figuring out how to get Michael Penix on this team, I am super intrigued because you know why? Like, I'm a real big on vision too. You know how I get down. I love to be able to say, okay, here's our short-term vision, and here's our long-term vision for this organization going forward. And both of those look bright. If they're somehow able to get a guy like Michael Penix and saying, and he's magically somehow falls in their lap in the second round, or they figure out a way to trade up in the end of the first round to get him if he's still there, I am super duper intrigued by that because I just really like Michael Penix because I got a chance to talk to him when he up at the NFL Combine. I like what this kid brings to the table, and then when you're talking about having an elite trait, that's what I look at when you come to evaluating quarterbacks. Like, and we all know that's very subjective. When it comes to draft evaluation, I look at it. His elite trait is accuracy, right? I really feel like this dude, that deep ball accuracy is something that he is really good at doing. And then for what we've been seeing as far as throwing a deep ball accuracy and being able to connect with players downfield, we haven't seen that. And I would love to get a guy like that, who's fairly young. He's not all the way young, but if they're somehow able to get him in,
I have a question when you're done, Jarvis, because you said something very interesting. You're like, if they go back and like double dip in the first round, so you would not take Michael Penix at number 8 overall. Like,
no, not at all.
Okay.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do that. Nah.
Okay, I got you.
As much as I like him, but I couldn't do that.
Yeah. I was just curious because we never there's supposedly things could change night up, but I'm fully preparing for a full run of quarterbacks in the top 10.
As you should.
Right. I just feel like that's going to happen. So it's if the Falcons feel like the only way that they could get Michael Penix Jr. is to stay at 8 and get him. I mean, I don't know if he's going to fall past the top 10 according to how many quarterback hungry teams need to move up into the top 10. I mean, it's an intriguing position to be in, but I think the fact that Tenitra, to answer your original question, the fact that the Falcons are kind of holding this workout and reportedly sending people up to Washington, a
heavy presence,
heavy presence,
yeah. That is very intriguing for all the reasons that you mentioned.
That we mentioned exactly, and it's and I love this word intrigued by right. On whether or not, because as much as this entire football party is a hashtag get us an edge rusher, is a hashtag pass rush matters, I guess I feel like, okay, you've got, Kirk Cousins squared away, and that's a good look, right? And you probably are going to have a good Kirk Cousins for at least 2 to 3 years if his body holds up and everything goes in his favor as far as his recovery from his injury. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like him having an understudy. I kind of like a Michael Penix type of understudy for him. And I don't know. I guess I kind of want, I'm not sure if there's a generational edge rusher in this draft. You kind of hear everyone saying there's great, but there's not generational. But I still think I might want to take great in the draft at edge. Not to say if you can get someone in free agency, that's fine. But I don't know. I'm kind of most intrigued by that visit to Michael Penix versus Smith Williams. What's your thought, Free?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, I mean, that's what. Yes.
So, like, Penix is interesting because, like, I feel like, people make a big deal about his arm strength, and I know he had he ran well at his pro day or whatever, but Penix is that type of quarterback to me that if he's going to be successful in the NFL, he's going to win in a lot of ways, like Kirk Cousins and Matt Ryan wins, which is basically winning from the pocket and being that type of like super smart from the neck up quarterback. So when you talk about having that sort of understudy, I do think Penix and that sort of combination of especially given, the presence of Taylor Heineke, you kind of get a redshirt year if you wind up drafting him for this upcoming season. And then you kind of sort of see what's what next year, potentially when Taylor Heineke's hitting the open market and sort of, like that's an intriguing mix for the Falcons and a intriguing development plan for the Falcons at that quarterback position. I think Penix makes a lot of sense in that regard.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I like how you said that. That makes for a good developmental game plan. Now, another thing that I thought was intriguing, especially because I think we all here locally are intrigued and interested and sometimes perplexed by how the national media thinks about these Atlanta Falcons. So this was actually a larger conversation, Tori, but nonetheless, Atlanta was, of course, involved in that conversation. NFL.com columnist, as well as NFL Network contributor Jeffrey Chadia wrote an article recently about the hierarchy in an NFC conference that he says has a, quote, perception problem versus the elite AFC. And what did we just say? The perception problem is related to quality quarterbacks over there in that conference versus what we have over here in the NFC. So with that in mind, he also said that there's a group of contenders, Super Bowl, playoff potential, intriguing possibilities, tough road ahead, and next year can't come fast enough. So first things first, Tori, do you think that there's an NFC conference perception problem? And secondly, do you think he got it right by putting Atlanta in the second category? He put the Falcons in playoff potential.
Yeah, I mean, it's intriguing because the whole perception is obviously around the quarterback conversation, like what you're talking about. And that's been the case since Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Tom Brady were no longer in this conference. And so that's been the last couple of years. So when you're talking about specifically the NFC South, like let's just talk about Panthers, right? Like let's just talk about the Panthers, the Falcons, the Saints, and Tampa Bay. What those four teams have and what they've had for the last few years is like significant inconsistency in play. And over the course of when you have an entire division like the NFC South that has that level of inconsistencies in comparison to what would be like on the other side with AFC, I don't know, like
even the AFC South, like they're
right. Yeah. Like the like it's almost not comparable because it's really difficult to sit here and say like that the AFC was having a similar problem to what the NFC South was. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but
absolutely.
I do think like there is this perception that if there is steady quarterback play, specifically in the NFC South, that it changes the way that the NFC South is viewed. That's why this Kirk Cousins move was so instrumental, I think, to the way that the Falcons are viewed, going back to your point about where the Falcons landed on this hierarchy. Like you plug in a quarterback that has the level of consistency that a Kirk Cousins does, it changes the scope of what your offense can do. It's all about the perception of the quarterback position and how you feel like there are the upper echelons of quarterbacks right now playing in the AFC as compared to the NFC.
And it's great that you made that call because when you look at the Super Bowl contenders on the list, Tori, every one of them has the steady Eddie quarterback, even
Right.
if he's not the superstar quarterback. Like in the AFC, all of the teams that fell in contender had those quarterbacks. So Jarvis, I mean, what do you think about that, just in terms of whether or not there is that perception problem? And also, do you think they got it right by putting the Falcons in that second tier, which was the playoff potential tier?
For sure. I mean, I think so because when you just look at just ranking the quarterbacks in this division, like I
Mm-hmm.
have to look at the bottom of it, right? It has to be Bryce Young. And
Yep.
then, you can have some conversations about who you think is better between Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr. I argue
Mm-hmm.
for Derek. I make an argument for Baker Mayfield because of
Same.
the previous season that he just had.
Yeah.
And Kirk Cousins has to be at the top of the division, right? Like if he's
Mm-hmm.
healthy, he's the best quarterback in his division. So I think that, putting them in with the Falcons being so close to winning this division in these past few years under the Arthur Smith regime, like we know that they were a quarterback away. Raheem Morris said it as such, and will continue to say
Mm-hmm.
it. And just
Yeah.
like, hey, if they had better quarterback play, I would not be here. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
and we understand how this is a quarterback driven league. Like teams fail in one year, and from a draft perspective and drafting quarterbacks, they'll go back the next year and try again. That's
Yeah.
just how
Yep.
quarterback hungry teams are nowadays because
Yeah.
the league is built for them to be successful and play very long, in this league.
Right.
So I really feel like the Falcons, just from a perception standpoint, they did themselves well by going after a veteran quarterback because
Yeah.
we understand like the gravity of which Arthur Blank wanting to get back to the playoffs. We understand like how badly he wants to do that, and he wants to get out of this 6-year drought of going to
Yeah.
the playoffs. So I think that if the people within the organization understand how important it is, and they went out and addressed it immediately as soon as the tampering period started, exactly 1 minute in, yeah, you gotta. I think everybody totally understands it from a national perspective as well.
Yeah, I would say the same. And Free, when you look at that list, you're talking about the Eagles and you're talking about Jalen Hurts, you're talking about Dak Prescott, even Jordan Love, all of those guys who are in, all of those teams that are in that top tier, they get there because of the quarterback play. But interestingly enough, you look at the tier that's just below where the Falcons were, and that's intriguing possibilities. And I feel like a year ago, they might have been in intriguing possibilities and down. But yeah, Kirk Cousins puts you in playoff potential, if not bordering right on Super Bowl contender. For that hierarchy article.
Yeah, I think so. I think this article really reflects what Jarvis and Tori were saying. It's a quarterback-driven league, right? And part of the reason with the perception issue with the AFC versus the NFC is like, again, everybody loves to argue about their various quarterback rankings, but I think probably most would agree that probably 8 out of the top 12 quarterbacks in the league are in the AFC, and a lot of those guys are on the younger side. Like Patrick Mahomes is like the old man of that group of guys. And like, most of those guys have been, only come in the league in the last, 5 to 7 years, while the NFC is just like, when you have those guys, like they're all kind of like retreads, like Baker Mayfield or whatever. Like Baker Mayfield's a young guy, but like, it feels like Baker Mayfield's been in the NFL for like forever,
Right.
And
like
so
7
now
teams.
you have Kirk Cousins moving, from the NFC North to the NFC South, and so that puts expectations on the Falcons. But I agree with you. Like a year ago, they were intriguing possibilities. Now they've kind of moved into that. I think they're neck and neck with the Bucks right now because that was the thing about the Bucks last year, which is like everybody had the question about the quarterback, but you love the roster, and now the Falcons are in that sort of conversation where you like the roster, you like the quarterback now. And so the year after Baker Mayfield had leading that team to the playoffs, caught a lot of people off guard. So like, I feel like the Falcons and the Bucks are well, positioned in that sort of playoff potential category. And, I think the expectations are going to be that those are going to be the two front runners to win the division. Obviously, our friends, air quotes, friends over in New Orleans will, think that, hey, there's a third team, there's a third wheel to this, bicycle or whatever. But we'll just sort of have to see how that plays out.
Indeed. When we come back, the crew makes the case for Mox in the deep dive. This episode of our Atlanta football party is brought to you by Game Time. Now, think about this. if you're looking for that last minute ticket and you don't want to be frustrated by the ticket buying experience, Game Time is probably for you. It's now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And I can tell you, not necessarily for Major League Baseball, but for a recent football game, the closer you get, if you don't mind playing that game, the better these ticket prices get. That's what they call killer last minute deals. All in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Now, again, those last minute deals might save you up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all of the above. Flash deals save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, and Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download that app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Game Time. All right, guys, time to have a little fun with your mock drafts. We are about 2.5 weeks out from the NFL draft, so it is still mock season, almost on a daily. Somebody's dropping, their 17th version of the mock draft.
17.0 T.
17.0, exactly. So I thought we would have a little bit of fun with that here on the show as well, because I know that you guys have either recently dropped your mocks on social media, or you talked to amongst us about, hey, this is where I'd like so-and-so to land. So guys, we're going to split this. And we know Tori had another something to do. So you guys stay tuned for that. More to follow her on AtlantaFalcons.com. But ultimately, we'll come back next week and we're going to take care of the backside of the draft. But today is all about the front side, the most interesting, the most exciting, and sometimes most puzzling part of the draft. But I'm here for all of it. So Aaron, kick us off. We're going to go with round one. And Jarvis, this is debate time. So if you want to go back and forth with my guy on who he went with 8, go for it. So we'll do that. And then after we go with the 8th pick, or wherever you guys land on, if you want to go up or down, then we'll go to round 2, and then we'll wrap it up with the 2 picks in round 3. So with the 8th pick in the 2024 NFL draft, Aaron Freeman, on behalf of the Atlanta Falcons, selects
Dallas Turner, edge rusher, Alabama.
Wah, 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 wah. Woo, woo. Wah, 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 wah.
I think, obviously, I don't think we're going to get anybody in this room dissenting on the idea of an edge rusher at 8. It's just a question of which edge rusher you like. And that's the interesting thing about this year's draft. You have 3 guys at the top. Then I think you have a big drop off after that point. And so it feels like there's a lot of pressure if the Falcons want to get someone who can make a difference in this pass rush this year. They kind of have to take that guy in round 1, right?
Yeah.
Whether they stick at 8 or trade back a couple spots, who knows? But it just feels like all signs seem to point. And of course, now that I say that, the Falcons going to do something completely different at that point. Just, because they got to zig when you expect them to zag. But I look at Dallas Turner. I think he's got the highest ceiling of any edge rusher in this class. I think there's a lot of conversation about who's got the higher floor because of expectations at this Falcon team, as we talked about being a playoff team and maybe even cracking into that Super Bowl contender conversation. If things go right, you want a guy that can come in and impact right away. I can understand why there are other edge rushers in this draft class like Laiatu Latu or Jared Verse that people think can do that. But I actually think the floor for Dallas Turner is not significantly lower than those other 2 guys. And I think, based off of that, maybe he's 10% lower or something like that. But in terms of what he has the potential to grow into, I think he has the upside to be a whole lot higher than that. And to me, when you're, potentially taking, the first defensive player off the board, which it seems like it's set up for the Falcons to do that, I want to swing for the fences. And I think Dallas Turner has that type of potential, and I'm willing to bet on that. And we'll see if the Falcons, are willing to say the same.
And if I can just chime in on that, the very last thing you said, Free, was what I loved, which is you don't mind them swinging. And I think that we've seen them come out swinging this entire offseason. So my expectation is for them to do the same, however that looks. However that looks, I think that's a great call on your part. You've been swinging literally since the day that you announced that Raheem Morris was coming here. And let's be honest, actually, if we take a step back, they were all guns blazing, even getting Raheem, even getting the coach, other than that other coach. But, they swung high. They aimed really, really high in the offseason, aimed really, really high with the coach. And Jarvis, I would agree with Free that I expect them to do nothing less with this 8th pick.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I would take Dallas Turner there as well because I've been mocking like crazy.
Trifecta.
Right? And, I think I dropped a bomb on Twitter the other day, or X or however you want to refer to it as. But when I selected Michael Penix because he kept being available in the second round, so people had an issue with that. But I think we'll get that in a minute. But I think that overall, though, like Dallas Turner is just far as from the highest as far as upside, like. I think there's a risk there, but like if it hits, it's going to hit. And I think that, you're talking about a potentially a 12 to 14 sack guy. Like that's how I feel about Dallas Turner, and being that, we're drafting straight up and you're telling me I can't trade down because I will go with Latu because I feel like he's going to be the guy that gets you those immediate results. You know what I'm saying? And he might be an 8 to 10 sack guy consistently, in that first year potentially. So for me, like I'm with Aaron and UT. Like it's time for the Falcons to swing for the fences when it comes to this position. We saw them go out, be aggressive with the quarterback. We saw how they were in free agency last year on the defensive side of football. We know that was the plan going into it. Hey, we're gonna spend money on the defensive side and bring guys like Jesse Bates. That was a risk in my eyes. And it hit. Like I want them to hit in the draft just like that. Hey, we need a game-changing type safety. Yeah, let's go get Jesse Bates. We need a quarterback, an elite processor. Let's go get Kirk Cousins. Let's go get the best option. So now we need an outside linebacker edge type guy that with a super high ceiling. Let's go get Dallas Turner because he's sitting right there. And he's more than likely is going to be the best defensive player or the best overall player that you can get your hands on.
And there's an article I read that I thought was very interesting. I know I keep using that word. That must be the word of the day. But there was an article that I read that talked about the fact that you might want to do a little bit more reliance on your coaches sometimes than on these scouts when it comes to certain positions. And that edge position was one of the positions that was called out. And so my mind went to this. Yes, Vic Beasley didn't turn out to be, who they'd hoped. But on the same token, Raheem Morris knows what that looked like and why and how it didn't work. So that might actually be a little bit of a secret weapon for him to say, okay, we saw someone with a potentially high ceiling that worked for, one season, Dwight Freeney, that worked for him and then it didn't work. And when it fell off the edge, it really, no pun intended, when it really fell off, I'm on one today. It really fell off, right? So I think I like the fact that if we're going to take a chance, it's a Raheem Morris that's familiar with chances that work, like his players Turner and Young over with the Rams, and when it kind of doesn't work. So I think that this is the year if you're going to go with all guns blazing and you're going to go gunslinging and gambling. I think the gunslinging and gambling with him and Terry Fontenot works. Now, Jarvis, what about round 2? So I'm going to be a little liberal because that I feel is like the one where we kind of see that as playing spades, one of the possible. So I'm going to give you the option to either stay at 43 or if you want to move up, move on up. Let me know what you want to do.
In this in this particular mock that I did, like there is a guy that is super, super intriguing, right? Well, I'm going with the word of the day that was available. And I kind of hinted at it to Aaron before we got started, but I wanted to kind of keep it a little secret. You know who was available at 43 for the Atlanta Falcons when I was picking? Cooper DeJean, baby. Let's do it. 6 feet, 205, ran a 4.4, 38-inch vert, 10.4, 10.5 on the 10.3, I think on the broad jump. Super athletic punt returner. No, I'm not talking about a black man. I'm talking about a white man. Cooper DeJean is good. Yes, let's bring this man to Atlanta and no evaluators, NFL teams behind the scenes talking about he's a DB. No, this man is a cornerback.
Yeah, I saw that part. Yeah.
Let him eat. Yes, I want to see it. So yeah, I'm going with Cooper DeJean right there with the 43rd overall pick. Gotta
Okay,
have.
cool. And how about you, Free? Are you going to take my get out of jail card and move up from 43, or do you think you can get your guy at 43?
I'm gonna stick and pick at 43, and I'm
Okay,
gonna
I like
go
that stick and
same
pick.
position that Jarvis has, a little
Okay.
closer to home. Kamari Lassiter,
Nice.
cornerback.
I'll be mad at that. Yes.
Um, you know, obviously you guys talk Georgia every week. You know, I don't get to watch as much Georgia. So I finally was like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and actually watch these Georgia players, especially on defense in the secondary where they have Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith, and Cooper DeJean. They got another guy next year who's going to be a high pick in Malachi Starks or whatever. So I want to get a glimpse of some of these Georgia DBs. And I came away even more impressed with Kamari Lassiter. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Kamari Lassiter than I was sort of just, loosely watching him the last couple of years just on Saturdays or whatever. He may not be the world's greatest athlete, but like he's just a hard-nosed football player. And that's kind of the guy I want opposite AJ Terrell. It's just like go out there and do your job, whether it's tackling, whether it's coverage, whether it's zone, whether it's man coverage. You've played against some of the best receivers in the nation the last couple of years. Some of those have gotten the better out of you, but you've shown a sort of toughness, covering the Marvin Harrison Juniors and the LSU guys and all those guys over the last couple of years that I really like. And so to me, the challenge for someone like a Kamari Lassiter coming into the NFL and being asked to start right away, as we're talking about what, the expectation is for this second round corner to be, he's a guy that fits that billing.
Indeed. And I got to say, with that one, it makes you smile because that those players out of Georgia, it's starting to be DBU. And he is definitely NFL ready, like right off the rip. And Kamari Lassiter, like you said, he's a hard-nosed football player, smart football player as well. So I think that would be a good get if they were able to get him. Now, when we come back, speaking of gets, might have some pressure on somebody. We'll talk about applying pressure in what's next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, a lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time, wishing that we were able to just do more with the time that we have. So the question is, time for what? And the question is, how to use your time more effectively. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is really understanding how to prioritize, and therapy can help you to do that. So that's where BetterHelp comes in. If you're thinking of starting a therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy, what's fulfilling to you with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. So after you wrap up with the Atlanta Football Party, check out BetterHelp. That's HELP.com/lockedon for a better you in 2024. So guys, I was checking out sound on profootballtalk.com, and the hosts were discussing players who might have the most pressure under, and no shock, they mentioned a couple QBs, right? But with the Falcons, I wanted to get your thoughts. So Free, I'll start with you about which Falcon, either one offensively, defensively, or with these new rules, could be even special teams. But who do you feel has maybe the most pressure on them? And you know what, guys? I'm going to ask for this. Not name Kirk Cousins.
Okay, well, you threw a curveball because I was just going to go for the layup and
No lie here.
Right there.
I think if I'm not allowed to choose Kirk Cousins, because as we've discussed all day long, it's all about the quarterbacks.
All about yes.
I'm going to go with Kyle Pitts, right? Because I think Kyle Pitts, coming off the season he had, obviously we've talked before about this, how he was hurt this year, and that was clear. And we're sort of looking, okay, we're just going to wash that season away, that 2023 season away. And now it's really about like 2024. This is where he's going to be healthy. He's got a quarterback again. Everything's, coming up in Kyle Pitts' favor, new offensive coordinator, all that stuff. So I feel like there's this pressure on Kyle Pitts to kind of have to perform and live up to the billing. I think all the conditions are going in his favor that he can do that, but there's absolutely going to be sort of this, cloud, I guess, hanging over him until we start seeing him being that consistent performer week in and week out that we know he's capable of being. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah. How about you, Jarvis?
Wow, I'm gonna have to go with a guy that's under a lot of pressure. I feel is AJ Terrell, because when
Yeah, that's what
you
I was
think about,
too.
with the going into the 5th year of your contract, whether or not you're gonna get a contract, more than likely they'll probably go ahead and get it done before the season gets started. And even if he does, whether he has it or not, I feel like
Mm.
he has something to prove, because he's getting
Yep.
too many comparisons to Desmond Trufant, and everybody knows how people feel about Des. Like he was a guy that's not necessarily going to pick the ball off, because that's what get you paid. That's what gets you paid, and people
Yep.
don't question it, right? And like he'll
Right.
drop a couple picks, he maybe get one here and there, and you like,
Mhm.
okay, there's that athletic ability that we talked about. That's that size and being able to stick to guys, and then
Mhm.
that's the taking the next step to be able to take the ball away. We
Yeah.
understand that this defense needs to take the ball away much more. When you see what it looked like when you added a guy like Jesse Bates, who had a career high at 6 picks this year and
Mhm.
this last season. So you understand how that can be a game changer when it comes to giving the offense extra possessions. So
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts can get the football and prove himself, right? And not be
Mhm.
busted by a lot of people, which is weird anyway. But I think that overall, though, I think there's a lot of pressure on AJ Terrell, because we've seen him have that all-pro capability, but it
Mhm.
seemed like it's kind of like falling off. And then you add on top of that, like, why can't you catch balls that are thrown right to you? Like those are some of the things that I feel like, regardless of whether or not he gets that contract before the
Mhm.
season starts, I really feel like going into this year, he has a lot to prove, I feel, in a lot of eyes.
Yeah, and I'm going to go. This is not someone who has the most pressure on them, but I'm just going to go with there's some pressure on him to see what he can be when he comes back. Avery Williams. I think going out and getting a Ray McCloud is a very intriguing decision by the Falcons, and coupled with the fact that Avery will be coming off the season-ending injury with all of these new rules and how important it's going to be able to still put the Falcons in position where they're flipping the field or that they have good field position. I think I'm very interested to see what special teams looks like. And he's probably at the top of my list for special teams. And I know I could have probably gone with someone that needs it a little bit more on offense. I definitely thought of Caleb McGarry because you made an incremental improvement on your pass protection, but I would call it kind of incremental. And I think with a Kirk Cousins, you're just it's going to command more. Like, that's just, there's a need there. And I'll ask you guys, because I was going back and forth on this one as well. I was going back and forth on AK or Ade. Which one at this point needs to just show improve, or you just need to be done with the experiment?
I think AK is the one that you're betting on.
Probably because of the second,
Same.
Yeah.
where he,
Ade was on the roster bubble last summer, then he got hurt.
right.
And now it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I don't think you move away from the bubble after the last 12 months that he's had. So yeah, I think the pressure is on AK to do more of the heavy lifting this year for this pass rush, especially depending on if the Falcons get that edge rusher in the draft that's going to be able to come in right away and contribute.
Yeah, it has to be AK. You talk about a guy that you trade up for in the second round,
Yep.
and you expect him to. You don't draft rotational guys in that second round, especially when you give extra draft capital to give them. So I think he has to improve, and I think he has to get more opportunities to improve, like significantly, right? Like you need a sophomore type jump, right? I know,
Yep.
That's what needs to happen, and I think that for him, it will behoove him to go ahead and get started on that in 2024.
Yeah, because I think it's going to be one of those, in the words of that great philosopher Raheem, no mistakes allowed. So good luck with that, AK. Anyway, we appreciate you stopping by the Atlanta Football Party. Your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, we're free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you tomorrow on the Atlanta Football Party, the Dogs edition.